There's a beautiful story of Guadalupe, of Fatima, and Lourdes. They all have their own adventures and beautiful message and things that really impress themselves upon our memory. And in this one, Our Lady appears about 15 times to Bernadette, and she chooses Bernadette, who was only a 14-year-old girl, and she's the only one, unlike Fatima with the 3 children. She's the only one, and she has to deal with opposition, and she has to deal with the police who are trying to intimidate her and trying to get her to tell lies, trying to make a fool of her. And she had to deal with her pastor, who was a very tough, intimidating man, and she was afraid of him. And she had to be a strong girl, and she was very strong, and she stood up to these people and didn't allow them to make her say anything she shouldn't have or to lie. And she just spoke the truth in an innocent way, in a beautiful way, with her sincerity and her innocence. And Our Lady chose her with this strong character of a girl because she had to have that strong character, but she chose her because she was very poor as well, very, very poor. Barely had food to eat in her home, and she lived in an old prison, in a dungeon, with her brothers and sisters and her parents. But she had devout parents, and she was devout herself, and she would pray the rosary, and she had a rosary in her pocket even before Our Lady appeared to her. And even when Our Lady appeared to her, she didn't know it was Our Lady. She didn't know her name. She didn't know who this beautiful lady was. And she would, this woman, this beautiful lady, told her to come there for 15 days, in consecutive days. And she would come, and when she saw Our Lady, she would be entranced by Our Lady. She didn't know what was going on around her, and she would be totally lost in her apparition of Our Lady. She would always come there and kneel down, and there wasn't a message about praying the rosary. Our Lady didn't say anything about praying the rosary, but Our Lady was carrying a rosary around her arm and would finger the rosary, and instinctively and immediately, at the first apparitions, Bernadette took out her rosary without even being told, and tried to make the sign of the cross, and wasn't able to until Our Lady herself made the sign of the cross. And then she proceeded to pray the rosary, and then Our Lady would disappear, and it would go on to the next day. And she would always start with the rosary, and that was a nonverbal message to the people and to the world, to how important the rosary is. And that was stressed, of course, more in Fatima, where Our Lady called herself Our Lady of the Rosary. But this was before Fatima, and still the rosary was a major message. And she, just by the example of Bernadette, the people would kneel down with her and pray. So there was a message of kneeling down and praying, and then Our Lady, in one of her early messages, said penance, penance, penance to Bernadette, and Bernadette repeated it, penance, penance, penance. And in her, during the apparitions, Bernadette would be entranced, and her face would take on this beauty which was unearthly, and she would go pale, but she had a beautiful smile on her face, and it was something that would really amaze the people who would look at her. And it was through this instrument of Bernadette that the message of Our Lady would come through to her. This heavenly beauty would come through to her. She would become angelic and beautiful in her face, and her innocence and her angelic beauty came through on her face. And this is what really convinced so many people that she was seeing something beautiful and innocent and good through her. And afterwards, Bernadette would tell the story of what happened, and then she would as she would tell the story, she would become sort of entranced again, and that, just as her explaining it, convinced the people that she was telling the truth and that she had this beautiful message to give to the world. And still she didn't know who this lady was, and even the pastor asked her to tell her what her name was, and she would ask Our Lady, and Our Lady would just smile until the very end, till the last apparition. And this is how Our Lady dragged out this, and every day she would go, more and more people would come, and thousands, up to 20 and 30,000, and in the very last apparitions, even before the last apparition, there was a space of about 2 weeks before Our Lady appeared to her again, and she would only go when she was urged to go. And she felt this urge, and she couldn't stop herself from going, even though the police and even her parents at times told her not to go, but she couldn't stop herself. She could not go. So she went, and then in that final apparition, after her pastor asked her twice to ask the lady's name, and the lady just smiled. But then that last apparition, she went, and Our Lady. After asking Our Lady 3 times what her name was, Our Lady opened her hands like in the posture of Our Lady of Grace, and then closed them and brought, and then looked up and shuddered as she said, "I am the Immaculate Conception." And this was really the climax, the miracle of the end, the miracle of her name. I am the Immaculate Conception, not I was immaculately conceived, no, but I am the Immaculate Conception. And so she shuddered because of the greatness of what God did in her, in Our Lady, raising her to that perfection in a creature, filling her with God's immense blessings in holiness, freedom from sin, but also the fullness of God's holiness and shining splendor of His grace in Our Lady. And so that made her sort of shudder. And then Bernadette would go to her pastor and tell her that she finally told me her name, I am the Immaculate Conception. And then her pastor almost fell over, and he was shaken in himself, even though he didn't want to admit it or show it to Bernadette. And he just told her, "Okay, you go now." And but that was really what really struck her pastor, and he finally believed after that. But after all these apparitions, after all these people coming to pray in the grotto, they would just come and pray. And after Bernadette stopped going, the people would still go, and they would just go by themselves, and they would go and pray. And so hundreds and thousands of people would just go in the grotto and pray without Bernadette even being there. And that was why Our Lady appeared there, because she wanted people to pray, to learn to pray. And they would go there, and they would kneel down. They would bring their candles, and Our Lady asked Bernadette to tell the people to come in procession, and to build a chapel. And Bernadette told her pastor that this is what Our Lady wanted, to have processions and to build a chapel, and which eventually was done, of course. And of course another major message was when Our Lady told Bernadette to go and wash in the stream, and there was no stream there. It was a little beside the Agave River. Our Lady didn't mean that. There was this little trickle of water that Our Lady pointed to. So Bernadette scratched at the water to get enough to wash her face, and then got her face dirty in the mud and made herself look like a fool. And but from that little stream of water came a flood of water, millions of gallons, even to this day. Our Lady gave this miracle to the people, and so many people were cured in this water, showing the love of Our Lady, her maternal care, and her, even her title, Our Lady, health of the sick, is a strong message there. And so we see this beautiful, all these beautiful messages that Our Lady gives, which is all the same all the same to pray the rosary, to do penance, and Our Lady made Bernadette do penance before all the people, crawling on her knees back and forth, and chewing on bitter herbs, and kissing the ground. And we as friars do that too. We kneel on the hard floor. We kiss the floor every time we come and go in the church. And so we do bitter things in our life of penance. And this is a message to the world. We still have to do penance, and we always will have to do penance. We always will have to pray, and to pray the rosary, and to be devoted to Our Lady, and to treat her as our mother, the mother health of the sick, and all her other many titles. So let us honor Our Lady today as Our Lady of Lourdes, and put into practice her beautiful messages.
Fructum ventris tuum,